Hello, everyone, and welcome to You'll Probably Agree. As usual, I have Ian Simmons from KickingTheSeat.com on, and I opened up my big stupid mouth again and opened up an idea for an episode. And we decided, like, let's do an episode about movies that never got made that would have been amazing to see. Let's piggyback on nostalgia because nostalgia is all we have during the apocalypse. And let's look at the films that could have been. But instead of looking into the future, let's just dive back in the past and be the miserable bastards that we are. What interesting findings did you have?
Well, here's the thing, and this is the sort of the problem that I have whenever someone asks me, like, "Oh, what movies have you seen lately?" or "What's your favorite movie?" I immediately freeze up. Out of that context, I can rattle off a million different things, like when
Oh
no one
yeah.
cares. So I was thinking, knowing that we were going to be talking about this, racking my brain, and I know that when we had talked about this initially, there were a few that had come to mind, but I drew a blank. I have a few written down that are, uh, kind of alternate universe movies.
Mm.
Some of them are obvious, and one of them is perhaps not obvious or at least forgotten about.
Mhm.
But I'll start with Jodorowsky's Dune,
Oh
and
yeah.
that may have been, I don't know if that was the catalyst for this conversation, because we've been talking a lot about David Lynch and Dune,
Yeah.
lately. So maybe that was it. But you saw that documentary, right?
I sure did. Yeah.
Yeah, and that was the story of Yodorowski back in the, I guess it was the mid to late 70s, perhaps even earlier, because he had this
Mhm.
entire Bible of the movie he wanted to make. He wanted to make uh, Dune,
Mhm.
and he got together this crazy assemblage of talented people. I think Mick Jagger was going to do either he's going to star or do the score or both, and I think he had Orson Welles involved at some point. But watching the documentary called Yodorowsky's Dune, which is a bit of a cheat because it's a movie you can actually watch about
Yeah.
a movie that you can't. It's you get to see all this artwork and you see all these interviews about people talking about what they imagined for the film, and especially with the film that David Lynch came out with, you just think, man, what a missed opportunity to see that other thing realized on screen.
Yeah, I remember watching that movie and two takeaways I had from it was yes, this would have been an interesting film. It would have been psychedelic. It would have been different. But I also thought it also could have been a complete joke. It could have
Yes.
been terrible. As Jodorowsky himself said, who's the guy who wrote Dude? I can't remember his name at the top of my head.
The author, the
Yes.
novel,
Yeah, the
I
author.
believe it was Frank Herbert.
Yeah. So Yodorowski says in the documentary, I would not follow the original ending. I would rape Frank Herbert and his idea. And I'm like, I don't know about that. I get there's dramatic license, but I guess the ending was like everyone's happy and like, in in the desert, greenery grows and everything's flowers. And I'm like, that would have been really corny. I think he would have used Pink Floyd for their soundtrack, which is why you hear Pink Floyd in the Denis Villeneuve Dune trailer. Which did you hear Jodorowsky's response to Villeneuve's Dune?
I think I did, and it was not flattering.
Yeah, it was kind of like it was a mixture of flattering and unflattering. It's like it looks good, but it's extremely predictable, which I kind of agree with. It's like, yeah, these are like all the scenes I've seen in the David Lynch movie. Like this scene, I'm just wondering how this is gonna work
Yeah.
for one movie, and they kind of have the same plan they did with Blade Runner 2049, where I think the film's gonna kind of stand out as its own standalone film, and then make more movies. But Dune has so much exposition and world. It's not like Star Wars where you see the rebel ship, you see the empire, you see the empire ship, and you're like, oh, got it. Okay, good guy, bad guy. Um, with Dune, there's a lot of information, and I just don't know how that's going to communicate into a 2 or 3 hour film.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be interesting to see, and based on what we've seen of the trailers, it looks like they are pretty much just remaking Lynch's version with, updated actors and special effects, which is fine. I don't
Yeah.
object to that on principle. But I feel like if they thought they had enough that they could do a franchise, like we have enough confidence that we're gonna have enough budget to do, a trilogy, they could have, done like a Dune prequel, where the Dune movie that we kind of know and love would be the second film.
Hmm.
So they could, instead of having all of this, expository dialogue and opening title cards and characters, just rambling on about, history, we could actually see that history in action. It's very rare that you get something that's as marble mouthed in an exposition and have it work. I mean, I think the gold standard is probably Fellowship of the Ring, where they deal with a lot of that in montage. And
Hmm.
so by the time you get to the actual film, you don't have a lot of people standing around saying, well, yeah, but remember the elves did this like 5,000 years ago. And then 5 minutes later, they stopped talking and, raised their swords. So, yeah, we're not going to get that, I think, obviously. But, it'd be nice.
Yeah, that's why it would work maybe as I love the idea of the prequel. You could have the prequel and then the Dune film we know, and then Children of Dune. Or you could have a mini series, which I think maybe a mini series is kind of like a cheap go-to. Like, oh, it needs a lot of information, mini series. But
Yeah.
yeah. Outside of that, one movie I always wanted to see. I'm gonna jump right into my favorite one, which was I always wanted to see Stanley Kubrick's Napoleon. Um,
Mm.
that's a movie he always wanted to make. It was something he was going to make after 2001: A Space Odyssey.
But he came up short. Sorry.
Yeah, well, haha. I'm fucking short, god damn it. No,
But I don't think you're Napoleon short. That guy was like, you could fit him in a box, I think. At
no,
least what I
I'm
read.
I'm like 5'3", so yeah.
Well, how tall was Napoleon?
5'3" probably. I don't
Oh,
know.
wow.
Was he like Danny DeVito height? I don't know. But
Stanley Kubrick's Napoleon starring Danny DeVito. That needs to happen.
oh my god, he wouldn't remember half his lines. Um, no, so that movie, I mean, Stanley Kubrick was absolutely obsessed with Napoleon. He read dozens upon dozens of books of them. He had like a library full of shelves, like listed in alphabetical order of a bits of his history. The way the movie would have been structured was quite unique. You would have a narrator, just like a voice of God sort of book narrator, but also Napoleon would be narrating as well. The movie would have been 3 hours. It would have been an epic going over his entire life. And of course, it would have been shot like Barry Lyndon with natural light. They would have used a 50 millimeter lens, which would have been shot at a 0.9 stop, which is wide open. So then they could use natural candlelight and things of that nature, which he later did in Barry Lyndon. And the reason that movie didn't work out was because, first off, budget, and second off, there was a movie that came out called Waterloo, and it tanked. So MGM, and that was in 1970, I believe, or no, it could have been 1970. Yeah, it was 70 because 68 Space Odyssey came out. So it tanked, and then MGM backed out of Napoleon, and I would have loved to have seen that movie.
I kind of understand that from a business standpoint,
Yeah, same here. Yeah.
but on the other hand, it's Stanley Kubrick.
Yeah.
I mean, when do you remember when Barry Lyndon came out? Where was that in his filmography?
I believe, let's see, because there's Space Out of Clockwork Orange. I think it was after Clockwork Orange. Yeah.
So mid 70s.
80s, I think, right? No, it could have been mid 70s. I think you're right because I don't remember when Clockwork Orange came out, but I think Lyndon maybe came out 2 to 4, well, probably 4 years after that, because Stanley Kubrick took a long time with each film.
Oh,
So
sure.
yeah.
I'm just gonna look this up because now I have to know.
Because I know no, it must have been 70s because 1980, The Shining came out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's why there was a splinter in my 1975
Yeah, there
was
you go.
Barry Lyndon.
Exactly mid 70s, yes.
Yeah. But that's the thing is I don't know what you feel about Barry Lyndon. Have you seen it?
I have. To be honest, I don't remember much of the plot, but I remember being engrossed the whole way through, and it was probably through the pictures mise en scène. To be honest, more so than the story itself. I'd have to check it out again, but just on the cinematography alone, which I would never really say for a movie, but for something like Stanley Kubrick, it's like that's a movie I always want to see on the big screen. I remember seeing The Shining in the music box, and it looked awful, like
Hmm.
the way they shot it. But I had to walk out honestly. But
Jeez.
yeah, but Lyndon, I would love to see. I mean, if you see something like Space Odyssey on the big screen, it's just there's you can never ever watch it on the small screen again. Um,
I do feel that way too.
yeah.
I think the Music Box actually showed Barry Lyndon years ago, and they haven't done it since. And especially
Mm.
now because everything's kind of shut down, they'd be selective about what they show. I would that's on my bucket list of movies to see on the big screen. I saw it. It would have been 2 years ago. I think while I had a flu or I was about to get sick, I was feeling under
Mhm.
the weather, and I watched it just in bed on my laptop, and I was thoroughly transported. That's a long movie, but and I didn't just like it because of the filmmaking. I was in love with the story and Ryan O'Neal,
Mm.
playing this kind of disreputable, scumbag con man who's just, bewitching the aristocracy and also getting thrown out on his ass and kind of coming back. Like he just keeps getting, all these wonderful chances with this terrible luck. And I never understood why people didn't respond to that film. It's barely even mentioned when people talk about Kubrick.
Yeah, I think maybe MGM was right in backing out with Napoleon because I don't think audiences are particularly fond of period pieces, particularly something like, within the time period that, Napoleon would take place, which I think Barry Lyndon took place a little afterwards. So it was like the beginning of the 1800s where Napoleon's basically reign during the French Revolution, I believe, was from 1789 to 1799, if I'm correct. I'm not sure.
Well,
But
you'd know more than me. All I know about Napoleon is from Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure.
Uh, there is a funny bit about that rings a little true. Was there's this behind the scenes story where Stanley Kubrick is eating with Malcolm McDowell, during break on Clockwork Orange, and he's eating steak and ice cream at the same time. And McDowell says to Kubrick, "Why are you eating steak and ice cream at the same time?" He's like, "Well, it's all food. I mean, Napoleon would do the same thing, and that so maybe that's where they got that from. Maybe Napoleon just enjoyed all sorts of food simultaneously, and he would just have ice cream with
Well, I
them."
also well, I know, and that's the now I want to look that up because there was that scene in Bill and Ted where like the kid's taking the ice cream part, orders like the kitchen sink and like devours the entire thing and like won't let them have any of it.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I mean that's fascinating. Did you know who he had intended to cast if he was in pre-production or whatever before it acts?
Let's see. So there was a lot of he wanted to cast unknowns to keep the budget down. I think at
Hmm.
one point, but I think this might be a rumor. He wanted to use Jack Nicholson, which what? I don't think he made a joke that he was going to cast Al Pacino at one point. I mean, Pacino would capture the short thing. So, but I don't know. I
And
just say,
I
yeah. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
no, I say I could see Pacino doing that because it'd be in the 1970s, like Godfather era Pacino. He's not the howling scent of a woman Pacino that I'm not saying it would be perfect. I'm saying again, we're talking about alternate universe movies. I would watch that movie.
Yeah. Let's turn off the video for 1 second because we're getting a lot of lag. Yeah, I mean Pacino back then would have been better because he wasn't. Yeah, he didn't have the nicotine didn't completely consume his lungs at that point. So you would have probably had an Americanized version of Napoleon because I don't think the movie would have been spoken in French, and I don't think they would have had Pacino do some bullshit French accent. I think they kind of would have done what they did with um, the Valkyrie, where they would cast all these American actors and just use their natural accents, and it's kind of up to your imagination that they're actually speaking German and all that.
Yeah, didn't they do that thing? And I might be misremembering Valkyrie, but where at the beginning of the movie they'd be speaking German, and then the camera would like zoom into their mouths and then zoom back out, and they'd be speaking English just to kind of set the stage of like, yeah, we're gonna show this for American audiences, but they're technically speaking in the native tongue.
I'm not sure. They might have done that. I vaguely remember a movie doing that. That might have been the one.
Hmm.
I think that's a brilliant move. And Tom Cruise looked just like that guy from Operation Valkyrie too. Like if you see his side by side photo, you're like, oh my god, like
I
that
do
guy looks
remember.
like
Yeah, I
Tom
remember that.
Cruise. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I gotta watch that movie again. I haven't seen it, and I only saw it once, and I remember it being okay, but I don't know if I gave it a fair shake.
Yeah, you don't need to. It's Bryan Singer.
Mm. Hey, 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 hey!
Fuck that
Brian Singer
child.
gave us he gave us The Usual Suspects, buddy.
I never saw it.
You've never seen The Usual Suspects?
Nope.
Oh
Didn't
my
care to.
gosh!
I already know
Uh,
the ending.
well, yeah, but I mean the it's a hell of a film.
Yeah.
Even if you know the ending, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah. I mean, I liked X-Men 2 and I liked Days of the Future Past.
Hmm.
That was really good. And transitioning over to superhero movies, did you know James Cameron in the 90s was supposed to do a Spider-Man film?
I think I had heard that. Yeah.
Mhm.
And that was actually I don't know if you ever watched Entourage on HBO,
Yeah.
but there was um, there was a subplot where the main actor Vinny Chase, who he guy who played an actor in Hollywood, he was going to be Aquaman in an
Yes.
Aquaman movie directed by James Cameron, and Cameron actually appeared in the show.
I do remember them doing an Aquaman movie, like, oh, this would be funny if someone did an Aquaman movie. And then eventually Hollywood, I knew it was going to happen. I'm like, Hollywood's going to go to the bottom of the barrel and do an Aquaman. So they got Jason Momoa to be Aqua Bro, pretty much. He's like, hey, dude, what's going on? And he's got like the big hair and the beard and the muscles, and he's crushing a bottle of Jack. It's nothing like the comics. He doesn't have that sort of 1950s esque, like arty sort of look. Not artistic, but ARTIE, I believe it was, as a comic book. And yeah, I could see why they did that, but it's like, yeah, Aquaman, like that guy. I mean, like, I don't know if you've seen Amazon's The Boys, but
I saw part of the pilot episode.
yeah.
Um,
Oh,
I
so
always
you
meant.
saw Aquaman
Oh yeah,
cooking his
Chase
fish.
Crawford. Yeah,
Yeah.
I s- no. Yeah, the boys. I read the comic series. I just haven't gone back to watch the whole show.
Yeah.
But no, it's funny that you mentioned this because this is sort of related back to what we were talking about. Um, well, first of all, side note on the Entourage thing, I loved that. That was one of the big questions because it became a genuine subplot on the show that, oh my God, James Cameron's directing an Aquaman movie. Are we actually going to see what that would kind of look like on this show? And when they premiered the film, there was a scene of like the actor playing Aquaman running down a pier and like starting to take off his clothes and jump into the water like a la Superman. But then I
Yeah.
think the film went out or something, like, so we never got to see what Aquaman would look like. But anyway,
Uh,
that whole thing with Jason Momoa, I liked the Aquaman movie,
hmm.
but it is sort of indicative of the problems of the Snyder DC universe. And I think the trailer for Superman, the Man of Steel,
Mhm.
is one of my favorite movie trailers ever,
So good.
bec- because it promises a film that we didn't get,
Mhm.
and that's a movie that I would like to see. Like if the hope and the heroism of that trailer were to be made into a film, I would be all about it. But he really
Yeah.
fucked that up.
Well, I mean, Zack Snyder's great at making trailers, not
Hmm.
making movies, but making trailer moments. If you think of the Man of Steel trailer, there's that wonderful moment where his hand is on the ground, you just see the ground rumble a little bit, and boom, he takes off. Right, like that's a beautiful shot for a trailer. For a movie, when you put it together with a whole story, it's just self-serious, filled with the most bombastic head and headache inducing action I've seen in a film. Um, and then the 9/11 esque imagery, which is completely inappropriate for Superman. But I have to say, oddly kind of fascinating. Is like I would say, like, if I had to see for all the Superman sequels, I like Man of Steel the best, just as kind of like this weird like thing you'd see in a museum. Man of Steel seems like the kind of movie that people would be talking about that didn't get made, but somehow got made, which
That's a great way of putting it.
because it's really like, yeah, like if you read about it on the internet, it's like, yeah, this is a movie where Superman levels half of Metropolis. And you're like, they would never approve of that, but they did, you know.
Yeah, it's kind of like that. And on that subject, and this is something, there was another documentary made about a movie that didn't get made, which I
Mhm.
haven't seen this doc, but uh, Superman with Nicolas Cage.
Yep.
And there was supposed to be, I think it was John Peters, the producer,
Yep.
in all the 20 years of drafts of Superman movies. He was obsessed with getting Mechanical Spider in there, which he
Yes.
finally did in
The Wild Wild
Wild Wild
West.
West. Yeah.
Yeah.
That this reminds me, I gotta seek out that documentary because just that one still of Nicolas Cage with the long black mullet and the Superman costume, I always wonder what
Yes.
the hell was going on with that.
Well, I did somehow run into the documentary on YouTube, and
Oh,
yeah. I don't know if it was legal or not. It was
eh.
just there. But
So you were the Man of Steel. Oh, sorry.
Steal.
Yes.
Yes. Yes. So you had, it was going to be directed by Tim Burton, right?
Uh-huh.
And
Yeah.
Tim Burton didn't know anything about Batman, but that was okay at the time. I still have, I mean, that was my exposure to Batman, was Tim Burton's movie.
Mhm.
And it basically, Nicolas Cage was cast because he was supposed to be this weird outsider Tim Burton character, essentially. And yeah, he had the mullet and he had this suit that wasn't like this standard Superman suit with the big ass and the red and the blue and all that. It was this ever changing, glowing sort of thing. It looked like a rainbow was attached to him, and it was translucent, and it was attached to his body, and it was bizarre. It was just weird. Like, what the hell would this movie been? So then, when it fell through with Tim Burton and he had to drop out, it went to Kevin Smith.
Yes.
Which, if you've ever seen An Evening with Kevin Smith, the story regarding the making of that movie is one of the most hilarious things I've ever heard. It's one of these things where, unless you've actually worked in Hollywood, you wouldn't believe this shit would actually happen. But this happens on a daily basis. Kevin Smith goes over to John Peters' house, and John Peters has Kevin Smith read the script that he made for him, which Kevin Smith was just supposed to write like maybe a 2-page proposal. It came in with like a 90-page script. And he goes to Peter's house, sits on the couch. John Peters lays down on the couch, puts his hands in front of his eyes, and then he just looks at Kevin Smith, then looks back up the air as if he's making a screen with his hands, and he just says, "Go." And from there, Kevin Smith reads the script to him, which would have featured Superman fighting Brainiac, who I believe the main villain was.
Mm-hmm.
And what John Peters' advice to Superman was 3 things, and I'm going to paraphrase him because there's some politically incorrect terminology for this year. He said,
God.
First off, I don't want the suit. So it's like, you don't want the suit? Peter's like, I don't want the suit. Too faggy.
Oh God.
Yeah. Second off.
So wait. This is before or after the rainbow thing?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Like, really? You didn't think the rainbow suit was all right, but and then he says, second off, he can't fly. It's like, well, the 2 things Superman's known for is his suit and flying. I don't know how you're
Wow.
going to do a Superman movie without that. And third off, as we all know, he has to fight a gigantic spider. And Smith's like, why does he need to fight a gigantic spider? He's like, do you know anything about spiders? No. And he's like, spiders are the most dangerous animal within the insect kingdom. Like, what? Yeah. And John Peters is a guy, I think he started off as like a hairdresser, and then he became like a producer, and I think like his family was in the industry or something like that. But yeah.
So he started off as a hairdresser, yet he's fine throwing the F word around. That's
exactly. Like, wait, You're saying faggy and you dress up here like, dude, you got some insecurities. You gotta work out with your therapist there.
Well, yeah, I'm not even suggesting he, was closeted or anything,
No,
but
no,
like
not that. I
just
mean,
like
just
the
like,
sensitivity of like people he was ostensibly like in the industry with.
I think it
That's
was just a
horrible.
homophobic sort of culture back then. Like when I was growing up in the
Sure.
'90s, people were throwing around the F word constantly. Yeah,
Right. But, and this is getting into some like Louis C.K. territory.
yeah,
Like it didn't always mean that.
yes,
I think in the context that Peters was using that with Kevin Smith describing Superman's costume, it definitely sounds like it was that. But, it's just kind of like how people would call things gay just to say it was dumb,
yeah.
that kind of a thing. Again, it's all very problematic and horrible, but yeah.
Yes.
Semantics history with with Mike and Ian.
Remember when we used the word gay for lame? Yeah, and then we cut to like that old NBA ad where someone's like, "Yo, that's gay." Then they cut to a bunch of guys going, "Using gay for lame is not cool." But yeah.
Using gay for lame is gay.
It's faggy. No.
Oh God. All right, before we get completely canceled, let's get back to
Yeah,
Superman.
yeah,
No,
yeah. I was talking about cigarettes, but yeah.
oh God.
Um,
Oh.
but no. So yeah, this Superman movie, I'm glad it didn't happen. But then again, Man of Steel is just as bad in a completely different way. So both would have been fascinating. Well, one was fascinating to see, the other would have been just as fascinating to see. I think people want to do something with Superman because he's such a Boy Scout of a character and kind of boring that you can't do much with him unless you really get the right film. Like Richard Donner did it, but then
Mhm.
after Donner with Superman 1 and 2, I know he did direct Superman 2, and then some other guy came in because, studio drama. But yeah, I don't know. Like no one could quite lick it after that.
Yeah, and, I understand the Boy Scout critique, but I mean, he's been around for, I can't do math, but something like 80 years, and there's
Yeah.
been 80 years of great Superman stories in the comics. I mean,
Mhm.
there's material to be mined there. Um, it's just a matter of translating that to the big screen or coming up, finding an executive who will allow you to do something really smart with Superman. I mean, I had heard recently, I think it's just a rumor, but that Henry Cavill was in talks to or had actually been signed for another Superman like Man of Steel movie, even though like DC has said that they're kind of done with it. I think the Snyder cut business has sort of revitalized interest in that cast.
Mm.
So I would love to see, having learned the lessons of like, with Aquaman to an extent, with Wonder Woman, and even with Shazam, of DC saying, we kind of messed up with that grim and gritty, Superman's an asshole thing. If they
Yeah.
could make a bright and hopeful and again heroic Superman movie with Henry Cavill, I think
Yeah.
I always thought he was a great choice for Superman. They just didn't know what to
Yeah.
do with him.
I thought the same thing because Henry, if you see him in interviews, and I know people who worked on the Man of Steel side, he's like the nicest guy. He's very charismatic. He's a gamer. This dude is sexy as fuck, and he's a PC gamer. Like,
Now, dude, did you ever see Guy Ritchie's The Man from Uncle?
no, I've never seen a Guy Ritchie film, honestly. Yeah, but
Well,
yeah.
I can recommend his early stuff,
Mhm.
but I can definitely recommend The Man from Uncle, especially if you like Henry Cavill, because he's the
Mm.
fucking man in that movie. It's
Yeah.
it's like it's almost like a crazy comedy James Bond caper where he's the James Bond paired with the kind of the dopey American. I think with it was Army Hammer if I remember.
Oh
Um,
gosh.
but yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's
You,
one of those fantastic. You talk about movies that never got made. That was supposed to be the start of like let's do The Man from Uncle 2, and then nobody went to see it, so it just got scrapped. And I came out of that movie thinking I want to see more of this.
so on two notes with that, there was going back to what James Cameron's Spider-Man would
Mm,
have been. I know we mentioned it and then we talked about but James Cameron's Spider-Man, it would have been like there were two versions. There was like a very sort of like, kiddie fun version. And then there was the James Cameron sort of gritty reboot version. In his gritty version, Michael Biehn would have been Spider-Man, an older Spider-Man, which I think would have been fucking cool to see, you know. Um,
And now, when was this? Was this in the 80s or the 90s?
This is in the 90s. This is right before Titanic, pretty much.
Okay.
Um,
Because I'm thinking, like, because I think of Michael Bean now, and like he's
yeah,
old, but I mean, this would have been like within a decade of him being in Aliens, and yeah, that's
yeah,
one of the things I've always wanted to see in a Spider-Man movie, and we still haven't gotten close, even though we've been doing these rehashes for 20 years.
yeah.
They keep him in high school. Like,
Amen.
you know what? They got close to, I think, putting him in college by the time the Amazing Spider-Man movies came out, but they only made 2 of them. But I'm like, I want to see Spider-Man. I want to see someone who's been through some shit
Yes.
and, is kind of world, almost like a Batman Begins stage of life. I don't
Yeah.
care about seeing Bruce Wayne in, prep school. I want to see him fighting crime, on a serious level. Same thing with Peter Parker.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm tired of Spider Boy, and I think Michael Bean would have captured that sort of maturity, maybe a little bit of like he would have been gritty but kind of nerdy at the same time. He would have been perfect. Alternatively, for a younger version of Spider-Man, they would have had Leonardo Dicaprio in the role. This is before they started filming Titanic,
Hmm.
and I think DiCaprio would have been great. I still think he'd be like a great older Spider-Man. He's kind of got that nerdy, kind of high-pitched voice to him. It would work with the character. Um,
It's interesting because both Bean and DiCaprio, I could be convinced to seeing them as Peter Parker, but I think they both have an edge that you'd really have to have a fantastic script to sell it as, even an older Peter Parker. Because in the comic books, as he became an adult, he still was, you know, not an innocent, but he wasn't like a dark character necessarily. And I feel like there's an element of darkness in DiCaprio and Bean.
mm,
However, talk about geekdom. If you've never heard Mark Maron's podcast where he interviewed Leo DiCaprio and Brad Pitt after
what he did?
yeah,
I gotta listen
yes,
to that because I listen to his podcast. Yeah.
yeah, it was last year. It was right around the time of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood because it was literally like right after they had presented a screening. They went back to the green room and recorded an hour with Mark Maron, and DiCaprio was talking about his childhood and how like his parents or his dad, I think, was like would trade movie posters and magazines and stuff. So
Mm.
he grew up like going to different trade shows and like junk shops and stuff. So he was like a hardcore fucking geek.
Holy shit. Yeah,
Yeah.
he's good. They could still cast him as Spider-Man, unless they want to keep Tom Holland as Spider-Man for like 13 more years and let him naturally age. Which I'd be fine with. If we want to actually see Tom Holland as Spider-Man become Spider-Man, that'd be cool. But
It would
yeah,
be, and again, that's sort of an alternate series that I don't think we'll get to see because
yeah,
unfortunately, with Marvel doing all their phases, it's like when an actor's contract runs out, they kill off the character instead of just like recasting, or they'll like kind of reimagine it. Like, okay, now we're just gonna, Tom Holland's aged out of this thing. Okay, we're just gonna start over. Here's another origin story. Here's another 15-year-old kid, and watch him grow up again.
yeah.
Sort of.
I'm sick of it. I'm sick of older or younger Spider-Man. I mean, and this movie also would have been edgy in terms of there's this thing where Spider-Man would have done this sort of sexy spider dance for Mary Jane, where he's like sort of seducing or hypnotizing her with his dance. Electro and Sandman would have been in the movie. Electro would have been like this multi-million-dollar guy called Maxwell Dillon, who's an electrical engineer. He's struck by lightning while working. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, he would have been a filthy rich businessman, I should say, called Carlton Strand. I think I was reading something else.
The
And
Max Dillon character, that was Jamie Foxx in Amazing Spider-Man 2.
okay, yeah. He was a nerdy, like, hi, Spider-Man. Yeah.
It was him doing the Enigma character from Batman Forever to a T.
He was, yeah. He was like a Black Riddler in a way.
Hmm.
Um, and yeah, we had that, and I guess Sandman would have gone by a different name, and he would have been a janitor who wound up in a sand machine. And at one point, Spider-Man calls Electro a motherfucker in it. Uh,
Whoa.
yeah, it's like, okay, Spider-Man drops the F bomb. All right. Oh, his name would have been Boyd, by the way. I'm looking at the information here,
Hmm.
but Let's see. Uh, of course, Electro ends up kidnapping Mary Jane because Mary Jane always has to be kidnapped. Um, and I guess Electro offers Spider-Man like $250 million to join like a bunch of like super powered beings, and he turns it down, which that would never happen in real life. You give me 250 mil, okay, sure. You know,
Well, I mean, I could even see that. Like, it's an interesting idea if you take like an X-Men organization where they're recruiting people, but it
yeah.
turns out that they're actually recruiting them for evil, or you
Mhm.
get them in there somehow through blackmail or manipulation. And what would a dark version of the X-Men kind of be like? I know there's other companies or other comics that have kind of dealt with that material, but I don't think really seen that on the big screen.
Don't give Zack Snyder ideas.
Yeah. Well, dude, his version of the Justice League is the Dark Justice League. It's like
Yes. Until Joss Whedon came in, and I don't know what happened if he was actually, because the guy who played Cyborg said he was an asshole and abusive, and I don't know if that's true or not. I mean, I thought it's like you did the guy a favor. His kid died, and he directed it for him. I thought it was a nice thing, but
that whole Ray Fisher thing, I'm very suspect because from what
yeah,
I've heard of the stories, it's like he keeps saying he was an asshole or he did terrible things, but then when he's pressed on it, he's just like, yeah, he was an asshole and did terrible things. Like, what? Okay,
yeah.
can you
What did he do?
help me out a little bit? Like, I need dates and names and incidents.
Yeah,
But
I think like Jason Momoa backed him up on it at one point, but I'm not sure. A lot of these websites this stuff comes from is like, comicbookbullshitthing.com. You know,
which should be an actual website if it's not.
comicbullshit.com.
Yes. um, well, actually, so the two other movies that I had in mind for this
Yeah.
discussion are actually comic book movies.
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah,
feel like this is the best genre to visit alternate realities.
yeah. Oh
Um,
yeah.
one is the Dark Knight sequel,
Mhm.
which I think I'd heard that Nolan had quote unquote always
Ah.
planned to do what he'd done with that movie with Bane and everything, regardless of if Heath Ledger had lived or died.
Hmm.
I don't buy it. I feel like
Yeah.
you're setting the Joker up. He's going to the asylum at the end of The Dark Knight. You
Yep.
can't not use him in the sequel, considering everybody knew at the time what they had with Heath Ledger's performance. Um,
Yes.
and that third movie just feels like a reaction. Like everyone's in mourning, but Warner Brothers is like, we need product. We need product. Come up with a script. Like, let's get
Yeah.
something out in 2 years
Ticking
or
time
whatever
bomb.
it
Got
was.
it. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. um, yeah, I just think that would have been really cool to see uh
Yeah.
what they would have done with Heath Ledger in another movie, even if it is like the Gotham and chaos kind of thing that we got in Dark Knight. Seeing him at the helm of that
Mhm.
and having to take down Batman and having Batman having to resolve those issues of what the Joker did to him in the previous film would have been just wonderful.
Yes, and there was that line in The Dark Knight where you knew this was going to be a elongated process where the Joker says, "You and I are destined to do this forever,"
Hmm.
and it's like you knew, like, yeah, Nolan doesn't plan out these sequels ahead of time, but they're sort of in the back pocket, like if I do another one, this is what I'm going to do. Or not this is what I'm going to do, but I know these because they did sign on for 3 movies. I don't know if Heath Ledger signed on for 2, but I mean, yes, everyone wonders what that movie would have been like if Heath Ledger were alive. And I think I'm wondering if it would have been better than The Dark Knight, because it possibly could have been, if you still had Heath Ledger there.
Yeah, and it would have offered a nice through line because Heath Ledger doesn't show up in Batman Begins, but that's the last scene of the film is when
Hmm.
Batman takes out the Joker card that I think Gordon hands him and says, "I'll look into it."
Hmm.
So it's like this idea of the Joker was in kind of in the first movie, he's really in the second one. To have him conspicuously absent in part three is either one of the worst decisions you can ever make, or it's a damn lie. Yeah,
Yeah.
I just don't buy that Bane was the only solution for the Dark Knight Rises.
Yeah, it was just one of those things where you're kind of put into a corner and
Yeah, out of respect, and I
you
understand that
know.
because out of respect, I think it's to his credit and to Warner Brothers' credit that they didn't just recast, the Joker for that.
Mm,
Um,
yeah.
it would have been distracting, I think, for one, but for the other, it's like, yeah, that was his part. You can retire his jersey, as it were.
Yeah, that would have been kind of disrespectful. They let the right amount of time happen before they did the Walking Phoenix movie,
Hmm.
which yeah, God, I mean, I feel old. I'm like, that was 10 years ago. The Dark, Jesus Christ, you know. With that said, have you ever heard of Darren Aronofsky's Batman Year One?
I, it rings a bell, but I don't think I knew anything about it. What?
Yeah,
How far did it get?
well, I think they were gonna film it. If let me pull it up here, but to give you an idea, Aronofsky was gonna make an incredibly dark. Here it is, Batman movie. He cast Army Hammer uh, as Batman,
Hmm.
and if I were to directly quote Army Hammer here, let's see. The studio was entitled to rebooting Batman franchise. Aronofsky eventually lost the project because of scheduling. To basically give you an idea, Army Hammer said like this movie would have been extremely dark. It would have really made you like understand how someone could be so crazy. You'd think this guy is insane because he's it's like who dresses up as a bat, sneaks around at night and beats the shit out of people. And if I remember correctly, Alfred would have been this big fat black guy, and they would have called him Big Al. Uh, yeah,
I I don't as much as I love Darren Aronofsky as a filmmaker, I consider it a gift from the universe that we didn't get that movie.
yes, it was certainly a gift. I think it would have been too weird because Aronofsky likes to make these psychedelic movies that are sort of one of the representation of physical pain put on camera that he does wonderfully well. And he's had a few duds. Like I'm kind of surprised how many duds he's had, honestly, since Requiem for a Dream. Is I consider that one of the most horrifying, brilliant films I've ever seen. But and Pie before that was fantastic. The Wrestler was great, but then he kind of started to go downhill with Noah and with Mother, and they did. I don't know why, but everyone when I was in film school had a huge boner for The Fountain. I just thought it was okay. Like that movie just consisted constantly of Hugh Jackman crying and hugging his wife, and we're like, okay, I get this. Where can we go from here? But yes, I think Batman Year One would have been a little too melodramatic and bizarre.
Yeah, especially if they're trying to do something like, because that sounds nothing like what they did with the comics, which I read in the last month or so.
Mm.
That is, if you've never read Batman Year One, that is a fantastic comic book that would have been wonderful to see adapted. Um, but no, as far as Aronofsky goes, I think The Fountain is the only film of his that I haven't seen, but I was a huge fan of both Noah and Mother, because they are so like unapologetically weird,
Yeah.
but and I would watch a Batman Year One by Aronofsky, but I'd go in with a huge heaping helping of skepticism based on what you're telling me. Jesus.
Yes.
And the last movie that I was thinking of, kind of alternate realities, would be Edgar Wright's Ant Man. Um,
Yes.
if he had
Oh.
stayed stuck with it, because I'm def I there's very little Edgar Wright that I hate, but there's a lot of it that I love, and I think seeing his sensibilities in the Marvel universe, playing around with Ant Man in particular, would have just been fascinating.
Ant Man's the perfect character for Edgar Wright too, because he always does those extreme close-ups in all his movies where the sounds are very exaggerated. So imagine seeing a story of this guy who's shrunk down to an ant size with those close-ups and all this crazy lights and stuff going on. It would have been amazing. And I think it didn't work out because Marvel has this is why Martin Scorsese criticized Marvel is because it has nothing to do with the movies. It's the decisions behind it. It's the filmmaking. It has to follow a very rigid structure, a very rigid style where the directorial sort of mise en scène from everyone is indistinguishable from one another. So it all feels like it's part of a connected universe. And I think Edgar Wright would have been stylistically too extreme for them, because they weren't making individual movies at that point, which is why they ended up giving it to Adam McKay, who, worked with Paul Rudd on Anchorman, and they did a okay job with it. But I think if Ant-Man was its own thing, it would have been pretty amazing to see from Edgar Wright.
Yeah, and that was sort of my beef with Ant-Man, which was, again, I thought it was a great trailer, particularly that scene with the Thomas the Tank Engine, where he's fighting not the Wasp, but whoever, the Yellow Jacket, and it's like this big dramatic thing with the train coming, and then it cuts back to the kid's bedroom. And it's like just this little Thomas model falling over. That stuff is wonderful, but the story itself was so pedestrian. It's like every Marvel movie we've seen. And aside from the special effects and some of the humor, which not all of it landed, I was like, I could take this or leave. I actually like Ant-Man and the Wasp as a sequel better than I liked the original Ant-Man.
Yeah, I agree. I'm trying to even remember. Did I see Ant-Man? I think I seen Ant-Man and the Wasp, but I didn't see Ant-Man. Yeah.
You made the right choice.
Yeah, I don't know. I was kind of like, I'd rather see Edgar Wright Ant-Man, because at that point it was just so ubiquitous with the word Ant-Man. I mean, I love the ads they did. I love the one where it was just so random, where you had Michael Douglas and I forgot his name already. And Ant-Man,
Paul Rudd.
Paul Rudd, thank you. They're clapping their hands against their knees, and they're going, ants, Ant-Man, and they just cut to it. You're like, what the fuck was that? And it was great. It was great.
Yeah, I mean the marketing, the poster for Ant-Man was great. It was just like a white poster with the Ant-Man logo on top and like a little bitty Ant-Man down at the bottom. It's just, it's fun, and that creativity was pretty much lacking from the film. And unfortunately, Ant-Man is one of those generic kind of Marvel introduction movies where you could make up a synopsis based on the other Marvel movies that you've seen and get it like 95% right.
Yeah. Well, having said that, to go back into the Christopher Nolan universe, I think this was the precipice for this whole conversation. Was Christopher Nolan was going to make a movie about Howard Hughes.
Yes, that's where this came from.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. So basically, he wrote this biographical genre about the billionaire tycoon, and this was after Insomnia, and basically the script for his Hughes biopic was, as Christopher Nolan said at the time, the best thing he had ever written. And pre-production got far along enough that Jim Carrey circled the role of Hughes, which Nolan said Hughes was the role that Jim Carrey was born to play. And the project died once Martin Scorsese's Aviator took flight. And from there, Christopher Nolan, and I think it worked out for the best, because that movie didn't work out. Christopher Nolan did Batman Begins, which led to him becoming a household name. Which I remember him during the Memento days, where I was like, oh man, I hope this guy becomes famous. He's fucking incredible. And then once they announced Batman Begins, which was sort of a Batman movie I had in my head, I swear to God, before it came out, I said it would be amazing if they made a Batman movie about, how Batman becomes Batman. And if it starred Christian Bale and directed by Christopher Nolan, I swear to God, I didn't make this up. But I sound like Trump saying that. Like, I swear to God, it's true. But
everybody knows it.
Yeah, everybody knows it. Everybody knows I'm not lying. Which I saw the corny effect last night. Oh God. That's another
what?
story. The Comey effect. I call it the corny effect.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That was the Trump movie with Brendan Gleeson, right?
Yeah. Where he plays like this version of he plays it as if Donald Trump is a mixture of Marlon Brando and an evil leprechaun with a Batman voice. It's just weird. He just started like, hey, don't chase me as failure. I'm like, Jesus. Look, I hate Donald Trump too, but my God, is he gonna just take out a knife and stab James Comey in the scene? Like, what the fuck?
That's awesome. Now I kind of want to see it now.
Yeah, just skip to the second episode. You don't need to see the first one.
Oh, it's a
But
series. I thought it was a movie. I don't have HBO, so
it's a mini series. It's two way. It's on Showtime. It's like two
oh,
parts.
show. I'm not a cable dude.
Yeah. It's
Uh,
I got it through my Amazon Prime, but yeah.
wait, you can rent it?
Yeah. It
Oh
was
well.
free with my Prime. But
No way. Okay, now I can watch it. Thank you.
yeah.
I don't have to imagine what that movie would be like. I can actually, or the TV show.
I think I paid for Showtime way back. I'm not sure if I still pay for it. I paid for it to see Twin Peaks season 3.
Hmm.
So yeah. But yeah, how do you think that Howard Hughes movie? What do you think it would have been like? Because we always talked about it, scratch the surface. I'm curious to see what he means by how Jim Carrey's born to play that role. In a way, I can kind of see what he's talking about, and I'm pretty sure Jim Carrey kicks himself every day that that movie didn't get made, considering the household name that Nolan is. But
Well, I mean, Jim Carrey was already well established at that point, right?
yeah,
But I don't know, because that you could take what Christopher Nolan said a couple of different ways.
yeah.
One, it's that he had seen an audition or had seen something in Carrey's previous work that said, "Oh, this is perfect to what I'm envisioning Hughes as," or he could have gotten to know Jim Carrey and said, "This guy is a fastidious, you know." Nut job who keeps his own piss under his bed, like,
Not where I
but
thought you were going with that.
no, where did you think I was going with it?
That he's secretly a really brilliant guy who
Well, I
just
think
has his own eccentricities, and it fits perfectly for that character.
when that might be true.
Yeah.
I just when you're that quote that you said just led me down the path of something very specific. Other than oh, Jim Carrey is brilliant and nobody knows about it. I mean, he had done a lot of movies where he had different, been able to display different facets of his range,
Yeah.
like Man on the Moon and stuff like that, and of course Dumb and Dumber. Um, but no, I'm glad that we got the DiCaprio Scorsese take on Howard Hughes. It would have been cool to see Christopher Nolan and Jim Carrey do something similar, just from a production standpoint. But
Mm.
I don't. It's hard for me to imagine another Howard Hughes after seeing DiCaprio do it.
Yeah, I think it worked out for the best, A, because of Batman Begins followed by The Dark Knight, and B, because I think Scorsese and DiCaprio were the perfect sort of combination for that movie, and I thought it turned out to be a wonderful film. I would have loved to have seen. I think Jim Carrey might have done a better role than DiCaprio in a lot of ways because,
Really?
yeah, because Jim Carrey, as we know, he's kind of nutty, like in his roles and off screen, but also he does seem like an incredibly intelligent guy. Like, remember when he had that whole mental breakdown and he was telling everybody about how he was in depression and depression is actually deep rest, and he was actually
Yeah.
right, because once he had his deep rest, he kind of reinvigorated himself after that, and that kind of perfectly sums up how my depression goes from time to time. And uh I think he's a really. Have you ever seen the movie about his making of Man on the Moon where he played Andy Kaufman?
No, I need to watch that though.
He really just becomes obsessed with the role. Like, he becomes that character and drove everyone nuts. And I would have loved to have just seen him as Howard Hughes with the whole germaphobe thing and going crazy. Like, I think they're like all those crazy sort of face mannerisms and all that. Like, because every time you see him in a dramatic performance, you're going, "Oh God, don't make a silly face." I think that would have worked perfectly because it's like that's Howard Hughes. He's a little woohoo, So it would have worked. It would have been fantastic to see.
It would have been a different take, but I
Yeah,
kind of disagree with you. I don't want to
yeah.
see. I think DiCaprio played it. He just walked that line of understatement versus overstatement
Mm, yeah, yeah.
to
That's
see,
true.
and part of this was Scorsese, the way that he like that was it the steak and the fish, and you got to see DiCaprio's like subtle revulsion where he's trying to keep it together because he's in polite company. Maybe Carrey could have done something similar, in which case, well, I've already seen it with DiCaprio, or he could have applied, more of that capital A acting, and it would have been. I think I would have been sitting there wondering when he's going to slip into the mask territory. And I have nothing against Jim Carrey. I'm kind of glad with what we have, in this reality, the alternate reality. I could be convinced, and I certainly would have watched it, but I'm not like pining for it.
Yeah, I'm certainly like I'm okay with what we had, and I just really want to see that performance though. Like I just really want to see, because like I don't think he would just be like, because if you see Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, he can play subtle and quiet, and he has versatility. I always think
Yeah.
it's easy to become an actor. Well, it isn't. It's easy to become a bad actor, but it's easier to be a dramatic actor than it is to be a comedian.
Sure.
Being a comedian is, I mean, I could tell you from, working in comedy for maybe 4 years, 5 years now, and then before even working in it, just being involved in it, so roughly 10 years. It's it's not a profession you'd ever want to choose. Um and yeah, I could tell you plenty of comics where I would just as quickly cast them in a dramatic role as I would with a comedic role, because comedy comes from deep, unflinching pain,
Hmm.
which is why comics are so cynical.
Well, and I don't doubt that, and I've seen lots of great performances by comics that have been very dramatic. The one thing that got me thinking about this while we were talking about what if Nolan had done this Howard Hughes instead of Batman. I mean, just think of the ripple effect that would have had. Heath Ledger might still be alive.
Yeah. Oh
And I'm not, I'm
God.
not, I'm not saying Christopher Nolan killed him. I'm just saying that that's like the preparation that he put himself through to become the Joker and get to that insane place. He was taking drugs and not sleeping, and that kind of like crazy cocktail tipped him over the edge. And then you start to wonder, well, what would have Heath Ledger like? What would his career have been like? All the great performances we would have had, and damn it. I mean, on top of
Mhm.
that, not only the fact would he be alive, we wouldn't have had The Dark Knight,
Yeah. Yep.
arguably one of the greatest comic book movies of all time.
If not the greatest. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think in terms of comic book movies, the greatest could go with it would go Dark Knight, and then it would be Logan, and then Spider-Man 2. I'm not sure.
That's a whole other conversation because I just about disagree with all of those choices. But
Oh,
anyway,
yeah.
no, but I realize on an island by myself in that regard. But yeah,
Yeah.
that's I think we probably have another 6 episodes of like what if
Oh,
movies,
yeah.
but I think this has been this has been
Yeah,
great.
I think we should do another part. I would love to talk about Steven Soderbergh's Lenny Riefenstahl movie.
I didn't know about this, dude. You're gonna be
Yeah.
my guide on all this. This is wonderful.
All I did was pull up an article on IndieWire, but yeah.
It's more than I did.
I just tried to, yeah. Yeah, I mean, God, imagine that movie. I actually did a whole thing in college about Lenny Riefenstahl and how really she didn't agree. She didn't know like Hitler was going around and murdering Jews, but still, like you're going to his rallies and not seeing something's fucked up. And she like tried to have her entire career separate from that. And it couldn't. And that's kind of what Soderbergh's Riefenstahl movie would have been. And instead, he did Contagion. So I guess either way it worked out. I would have rather seen his Riefenstahl movie than his movie about Che Guevara. So, yeah.
Oh, you watched that? Wasn't that like 20 hours long or something?
That's why I didn't watch it.
Oh, okay. Oh,
Yeah.
well,
And Martin
but yeah.
Scorsese's movie about Dean Martin. Yeah.
Oh shit. Yeah, we got to do another one of these.
Yeah. There's more. Oh, but wait, there's more. You can talk about Stanley Kubrick's Aryan Papers that got canceled because of Schindler's List.
Was it supposed to be an Oscar Schindler movie?
It was a movie about a Jewish family in Poland trying to escape the Nazis.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
But it's weird because like you could have that as a companion piece to Schindler's List, and it's not like two Oscar Schindler biopics. Like I don't understand Hollywood.
Well, I mean, because I think they're kind of this, because Schindler's List had that whole like 40-minute sequence where they're clearing out the Crashaw ghetto, and everyone. I think it would have just been that sequence, and people would be like, "Why do we have this scene in Schindler's List? We don't need like a 3-hour film on this,"
Right, but Schindler's List was a massive hit. Like, so people
Yeah.
were kind of hungry for that, that message and that kind of take on history. You throw in, hey, here's Stanley Kubrick with his take on the Holocaust. Like,
I'm just
I
thinking of a cynical producer chewing his cigar, being like, "Give me more Holocaust pics." But yeah,
no, I don't doubt that you're correct, but yeah, that is a reality that I'm glad I didn't have to live through. Oh
yeah.
boy, the glut of commercialized Holly. I almost said Holocaust, Hollywood Holocaust movies.
Is there going to be a whole episode of YPA Holocaust Hollywood movies about the Holocaust?
It would be the next and last episode of YPA.
Would it be the final solution?
Oh, I was going to say something, but I'm not going to.
It's okay. We live in Trump's America now. It's normal.
Oh, the new normal. Gotta love it. Anyway, don't you have to go?
Yeah. I'm
I'm not trying to kick you off. I'm just trying to be sensitive.
Yeah, my own show. Yeah, no, no, it's fine. I gotta edit this episode. But yes, I think we should continue this conversation because these are fascinating. For October, I'm going to be doing political films. Which
I saw that. Yeah.
Yeah. You never seen Nixon?
Mm-mm.
Ooh, yeah. Check out Nixon. One of the most underrated movies that exist out there. I think Roger gave it 4 stars. I think Roger Ebert gave it 4 stars.
No, and that's the thing is I'm a big Oliver Stone fan, and I really dig Anthony Hopkins, and that's I think when it came out, like, it didn't do very well, and there was not a whole lot of positive things said about it, despite what Ebert gave it. But yeah, I'll definitely check it out. So yeah, anytime you want to talk Nixon, I'm your man.
Yeah, I think Nixon's the next one for our political month, where we celebrate either the revitalization of democracy or the death of it. So we'll see.
Either way, it's going to be a good show.
Oh yeah.
I'm not talking about YPA. I'm talking about like the like the political theater
that's
in the outside world.
Thought, oh God, it was a great show on Tuesday. Holy shit.
Woo!
Oh my God. I mean, to summarize the whole debate. No, shut up. Fuck you.
That you could have saved me an hour and a half.
Yeah. All right.
Anywho.
Well, thank you so much for coming on. Check out Ian Simmons at kickingtheseat.com.
It's kickseat.com.
Fuck! At kickseat.com. I'm professional. No, well, even if you Google "kicking the seat," you can find it.
That's very true.
Yeah, that's how I find it sometimes when I gotta attach the link description. Same with YPA reviews. You type in "you'll probably agree," or YPA reviews, it'll pop right up. So kickseat.com. He's got a podcast. He's got a YouTube channel. He's got it all. At YPA reviews, I got a written podcast and YouTube, and yeah, you could check out our stuff. And thanks so much. Let us know what movies you know about that never got made. If there is any comments in this, and we'll see where we go from there. Because I would love to see because we kind of got carried away about, what about this one? Oh, what about this one?
Yeah, I think that'd be cool too. Yeah, if people want to comment on what they've always heard about a movie that was supposed to get made but didn't, we could do our research, and I could actually help this time instead of relying on Mike.
No,
and
okay.
Talk through those.
It's all right. Don't worry about it. I took an edible last night and watched a documentary on Napoleon, but that's another thing. It's legal now, okay? All right.
All right, sir.
You have a good one.
All right, you too, man. Thank you.
Bye.
All right, bye.